You may begin.
Good evening, everyone. The time is now 6:04 p.m. I would like to call to order the November 4th, 2024 Board Audit Committee meeting. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brandon Jackson, Chair of the committee and the District 6 representative of Prince George's County Board of Education. Tonight, this committee will listen to the chronic absenteeism and graduation rates. Ms. Barton, please call the roll.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Brandon Jackson,
Here.
Ms. Pamela Boozer-Struther,
Here.
Mr. Jonathan Briggs, Ms. Madeline Frazier, Ms. Lolita E. Walker. We have four.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. We will now have introductions of the committee members, starting with the board members, administrative staff, the board office staff, and all other guests.
I'll begin. Pamela Boozer-Struther, Vice Chair of the committee and the District 3 Board of Education member.
Good evening, everyone. Jonathan Briggs, District 2 School Board member.
Brandon Jackson, board chairman of the audit committee and District 6 representative. Now we'll move over to the administrative staff board office, please.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Howe, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening. Carlotta Merrill, Associate Superintendent, High Schools and Non-Traditional Programs.
Good evening, Liz Faison, Associate Superintendent of Student Services.
Good evening, Anthony Whittington, Director, Monitoring and Accountability.
Good evening, Ravel D. Fitzpatrick, Yehamias. I'm the Director for the Board of Education. Thank you, everyone who's watching or viewing later.
Good evening, Muriel Barton, Administrative Secretary here in the board office.
Point of information, I see our board office director trying to join the meeting. I mean, our audit, internal audit acting director. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Janice Walters Semple. Good evening. Janice Walters Semple, the Acting Internal Audit Director.
Ms. Boozer-Struther, Mr. Jackson asked if you could continue. His internet went out. He'll be right back.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. Give me a moment here to get acclimated. Thank you for everyone for introducing yourselves. We're going to start with the committee oversight mission. Committee oversight mission is as follows. The primary purpose of the Prince George's County Board of Education Audit Committee is to provide oversight of the financial reporting process, the audit process, and the PGCPS system of internal controls and compliance with laws and regulations. Next on our agenda is 1.4, adoption of the November 4th, 2024 Board Audit Committee meeting agenda. And we will need quorum for that. So I think we will pause for a moment for Chair Jackson to return because there's just 2 board members right now.
And board member Boozer Strother, I'm gonna text him now just to see where he's at.
I appreciate it.
Okay, he said he's powering back up I think his laptop shut down, so he's powering back up and he should be back on in a second or so.
All right, great. Thank you. Appreciate everyone's patience. All right, welcome back, Chair Jackson. We are at 1.4, the adoption of the November 4th Board Audit Committee meeting agenda. If you would like to take us through that vote.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. My computer froze. I don't know what happened. Um, okay, let me pull back up my document. Apologies.
That's all right. If you couldn't hear me, we're at 1.4, the adoption of the agenda.
Okay. One second, I'm pulling up the adoption of the agenda. Okay, all right. So the question is to adopt the November 4th Board Audit Committee meeting agenda without objection. There being no objection, the November 4th Board Audit Committee meeting agenda has been adopted. So the approval October 1st, 2024 meeting minutes. The question is to adopt the October 1st, 2024 Board Audit Committee meetings without objection. Hearing there is no objection, the October 1st, 2024 Board Audit Committee meeting minutes have been approved. There is no public comment tonight. We have 0 speakers that signed up. So we can move into the chronic absenteeism and graduation rates. So I want to recognize Dr. Elizabeth Faison and the Associate Superintendents of Student Services to give us a brief chronic absenteeism and graduation rates presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. No, was the PowerPoint being shared? Ah, there we go. All right. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Carletta Mero, Associate Superintendent of High Schools and Non-Traditional Programs. So tonight we're going to speak to you about graduation rate and chronic absenteeism. Myself and Dr. Faison from the Office of Student Services. You can go to the next slide. And so we just want to start with the 4-year adjusted graduation rate, and just want to share, next slide. First, starting off exactly with the calculation and definition of graduation rate and how the 4-year adjusted cohort graduation rate is actually calculated. And so it's basically the federally required calculations measure the percentage of students who graduate from high school with a regular diploma within 4 years. It's important to note that it's calculated by dividing the number of students who graduate by the number of students in the adjusted cohort. And when we speak of cohort, the cohort is made up of students who enter 9th grade, their first in a given year. And then the adjusted cohort is adjusted by the adding students who enter by transferring or subtracting students who transfer out, and so forth. And within that adjusted graduation rate, dropouts are still included in that rate. And so they're considered as non-grads. And so it's just important to understand how graduation rate is calculated, because oftentimes individuals believe that graduation rate is only based on the student sitting in front of you, but we actually have to ensure that we know where our students are for their full 4 years of high school, which makes up our adjusted cohort graduation rate. Next slide. And so when you look at this slide, and this is truly unofficial estimated data, it appears that we will be much higher graduation rate for the class of 2024 than we've seen historically in Prince George's County. In 2024, known as the cohort of 2021, because they started in the 9th graders who started in 2020 to 2021 school year. That was the year the school started with the COVID pandemic lockdown and virtual learning only. And so that 4-year track, actually, when we look at our projected rate of graduation, which is unofficial at this time, we're at 80.91%. And when we look at this data, we really attribute it to what took place during the COVID window. And so if you go to the next slide, you'll see that there is actually in that cohort, again, an unofficial estimate, there was a lower number of students in the cohort, which has been negatively correlated with the graduation rate. When the cohort size is larger, the graduation rate is lower, and vice versa. And so the class of 2024 had a smaller cohort size since the school year 2018-2019. It also had the highest graduation rate over the 6-year period, as shown on the previous slide. Next slide. And so when you look at this slide, now, again, the unofficial estimate with the dropout rate. So the dropout rate by year is also negatively correlated with the graduation rate. Students who drop out do not graduate. Students who stay in school can potentially graduate if they continue the graduation requirements. The dropout rate sets the ceiling for the graduation rate, and the class of 2024 had the lowest dropout rate of any graduating cohort since 2018-2019. This was a sharp decline in the dropout rate for the graduating class of 2024, which largely explains the sharp increase in the graduation rate for the class of 2024, with only 12.18% having dropped out, up to 87.82% could graduate. So that lowered our number from 100% to actually 87.82. is what you see in this graph here. Next slide. In this slide, you'll see that the largest gains between 2023 and 2024 was for our Hispanic students. This led us to explore the Hispanic and multilingual student groups more, which led us to discoveries that are on the next few slides. Next slide. And so the changes in the cohort demographics of overage multilingual learners enrolling in 9th grade this graph shows us how that demographics of that cohort changes size and increases or decreases. The class of 23, also known as the 2020 cohort, had a large number of multilingual learners who came from outside the United States and enrolled in Prince George's County schools in 9th grade and were also overaged. And when we think of overage, for the purposes of defining overage, these are individuals and students who come in grade 9, they're 15 years or older, because typically our 9th graders start at 14 years or younger. And these students age range from 15 to 20 years old. And a person has a right to enroll in our U.S. public schools until they turn 21. And for the class of 2023, the population was over 9% of the total cohort. For the 2024 class, however, this group was only 2% of the total cohort. And for the class of 2025, they will be over 10% of the cohort, which you'll see the difference in the data as we look at our overage multilingual learners. And so when you look at the change in demographics and the number of overaged multilingual learners enrolled in 9th grade, this graph shows us the demographics of the cohort changes when its sizes increase and decrease. In this graph, we can see that the increase or decrease in the overall size of the cohort is largely due to an increase or decrease in this unique type of student. If it were not for this special type of student, then this cohort size would not change much from year to year. Again, it's important that you, just to clarify, that these students are not products of Prince George's County Public Schools from kindergarten to 12th grade. They enroll in Prince George's County Public Schools as 9th graders, which is where we begin to count the graduation rate. And PGCPS can influence and support their high school experience, but not their previous schooling experience. And these students arrive in 9th graders with some with limited English proficiency. And because they do not have the credits needed to graduate at the level and the age, we can safely assume that some may also be arriving with limited or interrupted formal education or formal schooling from their country, which is limited and limited English proficiency as well, which has a significant, as you look at the data, when you look at other students versus our overage and how it's impacted our numbers over the years. And so the changes in graduation rate with our overage multilingual learners enrolled in 9th grade, when you're comparing the graduation rate to those who arrive overage with other students year by year, these are the numbers you see. When you see the other students, 79.48, our multilingual learners, 25.0%, and then our other students in 2024, 81.60%, and then our MLs arriving 48.76%. And so nationwide, multilingual learners have lowered graduation rates, and it's also true in Prince George's County Public Schools. For the class of 2023, multilingual learners who came from outside the United States and enrolled in Prince George's County Public Schools as overage 9th graders had a graduation rate of only 25%. If this group were excluded from our graduation rate calculation, then the county's graduation rate would have increased from 74% to 79%. Therefore, the decrease in this group for the class of 2024 will help to explain the increase of graduation rate. It's important to also note that this group did much better in 2024 than they did in previous years. And since this group has returned to be over 10% of the upcoming class of 2025, we can reasonably assume that our graduation will return to something closer to the historic average. In other words, we should not expect our graduation rate in 2025 to be as high as 80% again, based on the increase in that subgroup. And so I wanted to share just a little bit of some of the things we've done to ensure that our cohort is, and that's our 9th grade cohort, remember, for those 4 years. Our monitoring and accountability created a cohort tracker dashboard, which was deployed in 2022, which we call the business intelligence system. And this allows us to actually monitor our students in what we call by name and need, so that we're able to actually know our students, know what they need. It allows us to have the cohort identification for all of our high school students, the enrollment, the transfer status, withdrawal status. It's updated nightly, and it syncs with our actual IT management system. If they're off track due to grade level, we can see that. Their graduation predictions, and that's where much of this data has come from. This has truly helped us, and I thought it was really important to share with the public that we actually use this tool. We can dig down deep with students, groups with students. And again, we call it name and need. What do they need? What's their name? So that in every school, we know our students and we know what they need. And so as we monitor this, this is definitely a tool that helps us. If you go to the next slide, this is one of my favorites, of course. In phase 2, they then created the student color code designations. And what you can actually see is, our students on track with their courses if they're green, and we look at our students in green, yellow, and red. And we really pay a lot of attention to, are you green or are you red? Because sometimes there's no middle ground. But in your 4th year, we really can actually see more within the coding system to get that yellow, because sometimes it's one of the categories that has you off, So in this case, in the 4th year tracker, you can see, do you have everything you need as it relates to grades, testing requirements, student service learning hours, things of that nature. And of course, if you're red, you're not likely to graduate in the spring based on what the dashboard shows us. But we have been very successful of getting our students out in the summer. And I know we didn't talk a lot about it, but that correlation to 9th grade and 12th grade is so important, because 12th grade is built on graduation through the summer. 9th grade promotion actually stops in June. So the summer school doesn't count towards that. And that's our greatest predictor of success in high school as it relates to graduation rate. So we focus a lot on 9th grade and 12th grade. Although we focus on all the years, we do a lot of monitoring starting on that freshman year with our 9th grade academies and schools, and then ensuring that by their senior year, they actually are on track, have what they need, and some, different programming for all of our students. So I think that's my piece on graduation. I'm sorry, next slide. And then again, with the cohort tracker in phase 2, we can get so much data that schools are able to dig in and see the overall status identification, the credit count, graduation testing assessment, service learning hours, current grades, aggregate charts and data. So it's a lot of information that schools are able to pull this on a daily basis about their children within their senior class. Any questions or? A lot of information.
I'd like to recognize board member Jonathan Briggs.
Thank you so much, Chair Jackson. So, Dr. Miro, want to just say thank you so much for the presentation, and really grateful to kind of get this information. I was just curious, does your office or does the office have a set of goals for the kind of graduation rates and ways to increase them or to improve them based on the information you share, and particularly for multilingual learners?
So we set our goal based on what our data kind of tells us. So we've set goals between really 1% and 3% because of what our data shows and historically what we know and what we actually know about our students. And so when you look within our data, because I'm the lofty one, it's like, 10%, but realistically and historically, we don't hit that mark. And so when we went back, looked out over time, the 3% mark is more of what we set. But oftentimes, realistically, because of the cohort model and what we can already see in our students, because remember, if you drop out in 9th grade, we don't get you back. So our data is already impacted. And so anytime you leave us we get a W code, it counts against us. And so we do a lot of work on trying to identify students where they go, then when they transfer out, to code them properly so that we're setting proper goals.
I see. Okay. And just curious, so like when I'm not sure if this is your office, but like intervention. So like if you have, let's say hypothetically, there's a teacher A at school A that has, you know, a cohort of students that are multilingual that are not on track to graduate. Like, are there a set of interventions that exist that PGPS is saying these are the things you do to get those students, or we know that these particular students are going to be off track? Just curious, like what the steps are to get to that 1 to 3% increase.
Yeah, so we definitely have lots of interventions and supports in place, including our online programming through our EOP, which is our virtual learning program, which every high school has a virtual learning program attached to day school and an evening program. And so students are able to recover credits through our credit recovery program. And what we do with our counseling services and partnering with our PSCs and our Office of Student Services, when students come in, their transcript is evaluated, and we try to set up a 4-year plan. And for some, we have to do an accelerated plan because you'll be 21 sooner. So we try to do everything we can to put a graduation plan in place with those various interventions and programs, but a lot through our credit recovery. And the biggest piece is now we have 22 graduation requirements, and some of our students need all 22 when they get here. And sometimes that's at age 18. And so you have to program them, accelerate their programming and give them the supports they need. And we work very closely as well with our ELD department to ensure that our students that are multilingual are getting the strategies they need to actually do the pairing of learning the language acquisition as well as obtaining the credit for success.
Okay, thank you so much.
Vice Chair Boozer Suthers.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation and for the details of that data. I know that that's a population we talk about in many different contexts, from Blueprint and community schools to, you know, just about every student services support to help keep them on track, everything they've been through before they've been part of PGCPS. So I just want to give a thank you to all of our high schools, our principals, and our staff who support the students who arrive here for this part of their education. The questions I have, one is about how we're trending for ninth grade to the 10th graders who were ninth graders last year, if that's positive trend. I certainly witnessed a lot of supports being put in place, and I think Blueprint is driving that, community schools is driving that. So I'm eager to hear trend data that we may be seeing soon. And then I'd also like to know your opinion on if the original concept that our former superintendent, Dr. Goldson, laid out for evening high school and every high school being in person was disrupted by the pandemic. I certainly feel like it's been a loss to not have evening high school in person since then. And it's something that I really care about. And I'm kind of curious to hear if you think that in-person evening high school could help these numbers. So I'll ask those two questions in this round.
Okay, so in terms of ninth grade data, we're definitely trending positively. And I would need to send you the numbers. And I don't know, Dr. Whittington, if you have that currently, but we definitely can send you numbers in terms of the ninth grade trend. But we definitely saw an upward trend this school year for our ninth grade and our senior in our unofficial data, ninth and 12th grade for sure, ninth grade promotion and 12th grade graduation. As it relates to the evening program, we're definitely exploring some flexible scheduling in all of our schools, but especially our CSI schools and our schools where we have a large multilingual population, to really look at flexible scheduling to actually build out a school within a school, and those longer school hours, not necessarily to look like our previous evening program, but to actually put some evening programming back in place. Some of our evening programs, although virtual, some of those students do come in the building for support at their high school. And so we're definitely exploring some options just based on what we are seeing. Students do better online, and it allows us to offer more. And then, but some students do need that one-on-one attention in direct in-person face-to-face instruction. So we're definitely looking at research, looking at different programming of how we can bring it in and how we can fund it, because that is a biggie.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will
Want me
wait
to
till we have a
respond?
second.
Dr. Meredith, did you want me to respond to your question?
Sure, if you have it, I'm not sure if you have it available.
Yeah, yes, I do. Your ninth grade promotion rate moved from 66.2 to 78.9 for school year 2024, which is a 12.7% increase. So for board member Boozer Struthers, we do see an increase with all of the interventions that were put in place for ninth grade. Those 10th graders there, and board member Briggs, the cohort tracker where Dr. Mara was sharing, she was sharing aggregate data, but that aggregate data drilled down to individual students. So every school could see every single student and how well they're doing on the various metrics that meet graduation rates. So I can look at Board Member Briggs, how many community service hours you have, just in one snapshot, what classes you're currently taking, how well you're doing in your current classes, your testing requirements, have you met them or have you not, et cetera, and if you're really on track versus off track, which gives you the overall color coding. But within the overall color coding, it breaks down to specific color coding for each category. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I know my 2.5 minutes are up, but I do want to say that those are incredible numbers, and congratulations to the team and to all of the ninth grade administrators who worked with their staff to prepare for the 10th grade promotion. So that's fantastic. So I'll yield to Chair Jackson, who I'm sure is going to ask his questions next.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Vice Chair. So definitely great presentation, and I think that the data speaks for itself. I think that we face challenges that are very unique to this metropolitan area versus other areas inside of the Maryland the footprint. One of my questions was when it comes to the overage ninth graders. And you said the range is from 15 to 20. I guess my question is, let's say that they start the ninth grade at 20, and I know you talked about like, getting them what they need faster, but like when you turn 21, are you no longer eligible to be, in our school system? And if so, what's the track for them after they hit the 21? Let's just say if they 20 in the ninth grade, 21 in the 10th grade, or within inside of the ninth grade year, what do we do? Do we send them to some type of alternative schooling? And also, how does that impact our graduation rate, once a student turns 21?
So some of our students actually age out. And we try our best, again, to give you the plan that will work for you, but we don't deny students. So if you're of compensatory attendance is 18, and we try to develop a program, but we do get some students who come in at age 20, and we have to figure out their programming for them before they age out. But some of them will not graduate and will negatively impact us because we can't graduate them because they need too much to graduate. We don't currently have a program that's connected to us in terms of Prince George's County Public Schools for them afterwards. Again, at that point, they're an adult, and we would have to refer them to an adult education type of program. And so this is where the internships, the externships, and apprenticeships actually come into play. But sometimes, again, we run into the challenges of trying to work through our apprenticeship programs, but the citizenship issues also impede what we can do for those students at that age. And so sometimes it does negatively impact our graduation rate as a result.
And my last question for this round is, so since we don't have alternative programming, I don't know if that's something that we desire or something that we're working towards. I guess that's a question that I have. Are we working towards finding pathways, alternative, I guess, education for students that may be over age in the ninth grade, and we can foresee them, I guess, aging out prior to them even getting started. I mean, because if it takes 4 years to get out of high school and you start at 20 years old, or even at 18 or 19, you're going to or 17, like you're going to age out. So it's going to be a challenge. So, and by our population of the Hispanic community growing, I think we're over like 40% or something like that. Um, it seems like this may be a challenge that will face more often than we have in the past because of the emergence of the students. But also, um has there been, and I don't know if this is the space to talk about this, but has there been any challenges with having 20-year-olds and 14-year-olds occupying the same space? Because that can present challenges on both sides for the kids and for the young adults that are 20 years old.
And so the first piece, we have done some research, and so I'm not sure how many years it's been now. So we opened the 2 international schools, about 8 years ago, to address that population. However, they're very small, so they only have a population up to 400 students. Our original goal with one was to be a newcomer center. However, because of needing more space and the needs of our students in that population, we still are a very small population, which really one takes students from across the district and the other takes students on the northern end. And so we've explored some different things that we see in other states, like the Newcomer Center, where individuals with these needs go there, get the language before they actually go into the school. And so that'll help some of it, but it's not always going to help the older students. And in most cases, we have not, on the second part of the question, we have not run into issues of the 14-year-old and the 21-year-old in our recent years. We've had some different, issues that arise no matter what, but we definitely are very mindful of the age gap and just really trying to program the students properly so that they can get something, even if it's just the language acquisition.
Thank you. So, I don't know if it was board member Briggs. I didn't catch you went up first. Briggs or board member Struthers? Okay.
Mr. Briggs can
Struthers?
go next. I'll follow him.
Okay.
I don't have to go first. I mean, I'm happy to go after. I don't want to do this though. I know that people are like, someone go. So I'll go. So I just wanted to say, I really appreciate this presentation. And I was just thinking for like sequencing of services, like I was thinking about post-secondary readiness and how important it is that, like, you always hear these things about students going off to college and then realizing there's a deficit, right? Like I wasn't prepared for math, or I wasn't prepared for that English class, and I got to have to take remediation. And I think specifically for our multilingual learners, that might be a thing. And it's a thing for a lot of people. So I don't want to make it seem like there's any targeted group, but I'm just curious, like the goal is, for our schools is not to get them just out the door, right? We're not trying to just usher people through and like whatever comes after that is what it is. But it's really like we're sending you to the next phase of whatever it is that's right for you. And I was just curious, like when we think about graduation rates, how connected is that to the work that's happening around post-secondary readiness? How's that kind of like infused into any of this work, if at all? And just what are your thoughts on that?
So one of the things we do is to ensure that our students are college and career ready. And so ensuring that they're either ready for the 2-year college or 4-year college, military, or the workforce. And so that's very important to how we're programming them again. And so that we ensure that when they leave us, that they're able to do one of the 4, hopefully. And we know that the workforce has increased a lot more just with the cost of college alone. I say now, I don't know how my parents did it. If I had to go today, I probably would never be able to do it, and so we're actually, preparing our students for the future, but doing a lot more talking around, are you military? Are you college and career from 2 or 4-year college? Or are you going into the workforce? And so just really trying to give them the different avenues and resources to do all of them.
Okay, I think of the question just for clarity's sake, like the green, yellow, and red, like how connected is that to like actual workforce readiness, actual college readiness, or community college readiness? Like, are there standards that are tied to any of that?
No, so the red, the green, and the yellow are connected strictly to graduation requirements. And so whether you are on track in terms of your credits, your student service learning hours, your testing requirements, and so forth. So it's only connected to that component. It's not connected to whether your SAT scores or.
I definitely think that muted you because I heard nothing after that thing went off. Like it was you off. So if you want to finish that sentence, then I'm done.
I think I said, it's definitely for high school credit availability, not for the college availability, like your PSAT or SAT scores. None of that's attached in the dashboard.
Okay, thank you so much. Mia, that was new for me. I didn't know that they play the classical music when you run out of time. I saw that. So I'll move over to Vice Chair Boozer Strother.
Yeah, thank you so much. That I actually appreciate that question, Mr. Board Member Briggs, about exactly what red, yellow, and green mean. Like understanding that this is really credit. It's about the credits. It's not about the context of the credit and graduation. So thank you for that. One of as this board audit committee is new, and a little bit of what we're doing tonight, does feel a little bit of like academic achievement committee, but what we're really looking at is how you talked about the business intelligence system and, the numbers and how this is, Chair Jackson has really led us on the idea of key performance indicators for PGCPS, and I'm certainly have, more of that hat on this evening around that. So that makes me think about Maryland State Department of Education and the Maryland State Board of Education and how they present this data. And so I was wondering, and maybe this is where Mr. Whittington could come in around like the ideal format for Maryland State Department of Education to present this data, because they don't want to end this like simplistic comparisons of the 24 data sets of the 24 school districts, which are entirely different students. And Dr. Morrow really, once again presented the significance for Prince George's County. So I keep having this issue with the state testing and the state report cards, this very simplistic presentation of the data. So I was wondering any thoughts on how we speak to that in this next cycle of public data comparisons coming out from MSDE.
And Mr. Whittington, I think that's a good place for you to jump in. But I think that one of the things the Monitoring Accountability has done very well is definitely point out the things that in the data that Prince George's County Public Schools and what we deal with, that when you look at the comparison of the other 24 districts, 23, that's not there. And so definitely as we look at it, I believe that's a great way to disaggregate it, because our subgroups go a lot deeper than some of our counterparts across the state.
Board Member Boozer Struthers, you bring up you bring up a wonderful point. We've spoken to the board at the state level to talk about how data is really displayed and how Prince George's County is simply just a different place because we bring in the largest number of students that come from outside of the country to be given an education. And as Dr. Merrill referenced earlier, a number of them that come in are over age, not the normal age, and she hasn't brought up that many of them don't come in speaking any English. But it is then our expectation they're already over age. They still have to acquire 22 credits along with the other requirements, but in the language of English. So it's not that they just have to acquire all the credits. They have to do this in English and proficient. So it's a number of hurdles that schools are working diligently to support. But we in Prince George's County attempt to tell our own story. So we do a lot of two-tiered analysis and disaggregate to show that, we're doing, when you compare just African American students in Prince George's County and how well we're able to move them through, we're doing well in comparison to how the states are doing. Hispanic students as well. And then look at the students that come in over age and unaccredited. Some of the things that we're doing is very successful, but you just can't see it when you just put all of the LEAs side by side and say a proficiency level. So you really have to get to a two-tier analysis. So we'll continue to tell our own story so that you can see the great work that's being done inside of our wonderful school district.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think that's part of how, in our goals around the KPIs that we make sure that we're telling our story. And these are this is kind of new angles we're taking here with Audit Committee. So I thank you.
Thank you for that, Vice Chair Boozer Struthers. So, my comment is, so I have two comments. So the first thing is just to follow up on the last comment you had, Mr. Whittington, was about how we tell our own story. And I think that that's good to tell our own story, but I just feel like there should be something more that we can do. I don't know what it is, but I feel, in my humble opinion, it's just like we will always be, the bottom tier compared to our counterparts because of the challenges that we face. And if there's not an equity lens placed on scoring to disaggregate the information in order to make things, I mean, not all equal, but apples to apples, we'll always be at the bottom. And I've mentioned this before in our general sessions, was that businesses and just private and private entities and even public sector entities in general, when they look to relocate or move into different spaces, they always look at these, different variables, which makes, communities viable. And education is probably one of the heaviest weighted variables. So they're disincentivized to move into our county because of the score. So I don't know what we can do as board members, and I've mentioned this before, to kind of help um, reshape the narrative, because us telling our narrative, because anybody who's facing the challenge will be able to going to say differently, of course, because they're going to think it's subjective, but we need from the state level to reflect the inadequate scoring. So I don't know what measures we can take to do that. And then also real quick, because I'm short on time, but as far as the students that are over age that come into the ninth grade, a lot of them may not have the because one of the international schools is in my district, Largo, international, and a lot of the students may not have the academic portion, like the reading, writing, and arithmetic, but they are very advanced in, like the trades, and they come in with a high level of intelligence on like carpentry, mechanic stuff, and all of those things. And so I don't know if there's an opportunity, not necessarily the CTE programs, but partner with, I don't know, like maybe the labor unions or something like that, to see how they can, play a part in helping us, making sure that those students get taken care of as well. Yep. And just to wrap up my comment, I was going to say lastly, and then do we have any partnership with Prince George's County Community College for the overage students that may time out or age out? Is there any track with Prince George's County Community College, a partnership where we can help them? Because it's kind of like, I don't want to say inhumane, but it's crazy to think that they can come in our school system and then we can get them what they need for a year, but then when they age out in a year, it's just like you're an adult now, so you're on your own. So is there any like partnership with the community college to kind of help them further and get the education they need so they can be productive citizens in our community? Thank you.
So, Mr. Jackson, at one point we had with PG Community College, a GED program. But many of us students, again, weren't successful going that route because, of course, the GED is very difficult. And if you don't have, with the language barriers, it actually causes, them not to be successful. We've had some students to be successful with the GED. And then even with our apprenticeships, again, we've run into them not being legal citizens. And so we've been able to find some jobs and some things, and then we hit a wall. We've had some students that go through various programs, just as you said, okay, well, instead of this, we can give you this, but then we're not able to actually move forward because of the citizenship issues as well. But definitely we're open to doing whatever we can to definitely address this, because this is an ongoing issue for us.
I'd like to recognize Dr. Faison.
I was just going to say, on the heels of that, last year, I think, was the first alternative education night that the Office of School Counseling provided to students. And it did incorporate a lot of the programs that Dr. Marrow is speaking about, and the difficult programs that are external to PGCPS, like Free State Challenge and programs like that we refer students to that we know are going to age out. But the premise of having that type of session is to give parents and students, the menu of options that they can take right now in PGCPS that will help them graduate, and then add the additional resources when a student we know is going to age out. What are those warm handoffs that we can do to other organizations and programs where students can be successful in making their next course in life? And this year will be the second all ed night.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment. So I guess I'm gonna go for a third round. Board Member Briggs.
Thank you so much.
Interesting topic. So this is a good thing.
Yeah, and it was a few things that were said that I just wanted to make sure I had to say it. But I just want to say one, I think, because I know that Dr. Marrow really quickly said this about the GED piece and the language barrier, which is like if someone who is multilingual takes the GED, it's only in English. So just for clarity's sake for board members, and that's something we actually have in our policy platform. And it's a significant barrier because if you are struggling, right, with English, then how could you pass the GED? Effectively, you will fail. So I think that that's something that is a kind of a low-hanging fruit piece that legislators can do, and we can all kind of, I think, as practitioners, call for. But the other thing I was just going to say was I really have concerns about, like, I think as we continue to discuss these things, and I'm specifically talking about not just graduation rates for all of our students, though that of course matters, but like for our multilingual students, one, because I think we have such a significant population of students that are multilingual. I think creating it to Chair Jackson's point, like creating a space in an environment that is welcoming and conducive to families to say, I want to move here because I know that my children are going to get a quality education. And our school district should not be, it really should be, right, kind of a beacon to say, if this is our majority population, we're taking care of our students and we're investing in the resources, whether that's bilingual educators or curriculum that also thinks about how the brain operates, all those different things that from the time that our students enter to the time they graduate, whether they started pre-K or not, they're ready to go. And it's just something that I just really hope won't be like an equity issue for the school district, because I see it as a significant gap. If you have students who have their lives ahead of them and have so much promise, to be like, oh well, just have that issue because you only speak English, or or we only have these resources available for you, when we know that our school district reflects the majority population of students that are multilingual. So I wanted to say that because I feel like this really is an equity issue, and as we continue to have these conversations, and you all are doing everything you can do, but as we have these conversations, like I just don't want it to be swept under the rug that it's like the significance of the life impact that this has, right, the rest of their life. We don't get it right now, this is the rest of their lives, and that's too consequential for me as a board member. So I'm hoping that we can continue to have presentations on this to understand how we can support our multilingual learners.
And just so you know, Mr. Briggs, we didn't hit the curriculum side and all the resources and departments that we partner with to actually take care of all of our students, but definitely we're doing a lot of work with our ELD department with instructional strategies in the classroom to ensure that even our administrators, as you talk about a welcoming school, you know, and the equity component of just how are we ensuring that all of our families are welcome in the school and getting what they need. And so it's been an educational ride for all of us, just in what are the needs of those students and those families so that we can ensure that they have what they need.
Thank you. So and my last question is, you had made a comment about the challenges with working with the trades because of the citizenship requirements and things of that nature. So if a student was, and I don't know the title, does Title I schools or community schools have this component, but as a wraparound service, is there a portion of our office that can help with pathway to citizenship for the students that are timing out? And the reason why I think I'm more locked in on these questions because I kind of want to find a way to disaggregate some of this information or data where we can put we can put like-minded individuals together in order to have a better representation of Prince George's County, the data versus, lumping everything together and just whatever that number is, we get it, So I want to just see what are ways that we can help these students. So I guess my question while I'm rambling is my question is about, do we have a process that can help students that are aged out get a pathway to citizenship in order for them to get connected to the trades or, college or whatever it is that they may be interested into?
And so we've done a lot with the CTE department. They have some data that definitely supports your question much better than I can. And it's not just an issue with Prince George's County Public Schools. It's actually big across the state of Maryland because, again, like we've had students that we hire ourselves within the county, like many of our construction trade students work within our own department through Dr. Coleman's shop. And then we've had some students that we weren't able to outside because of the citizenship components. And so that's one of the things that we've been challenged with in trying to work with legislators and things of that nature to actually look at what other states are doing to get them citizenship beyond, what we can do in the state of Maryland. So a lot of it is that piece with Mr. Briggs was talking about of getting the legislators on board. Say what are some alternative methods and things that we can do for citizenship? I mean, we've even had students who are our valedictorians and salutatorians that we've had to identify colleges that will actually take them without being US citizens, So we now kind of know some of those schools that will actually take our students with without having the citizenship.
Thank you. Woman Struthers?
I don't have any more questions on this section.
Thank you. So, Dr. Faison, does this complete your presentation?
We now have the chronic absenteeism piece. Next slide. Yeah. So tonight we just wanted to talk a little bit about chronic absenteeism, looking at June, where we were in June. And then since we've been in school a full 2 months, where we may be tonight with our data, then looking at some student groups. But first, we always start with level setting about how chronic absenteeism is defined. And it's defined by the number of students who are expected to attend school for at least 10 days and who are absent for 10% of the time that they have been enrolled in school. And you'll see an example on the slide that talks about a student who has been enrolled for 30 days. If they have been for 10% of that time would be 3 days. And keeping in mind that chronic absenteeism includes both lawful and unlawful absences. And then when we look at each school's Maryland State Report Card, chronic absenteeism counts for 15% of the score that our schools receive on their Maryland State Report Card. Next slide. And so this chart shows each school category, and it shows the improvement in our chronic absenteeism rates, primarily for elementary K-8s and middle, and also a slight improvement for high school as well. Charter schools sort of remaining the same. And it shows where we were from school year June 2023 and the improvement in our rates from June school year 2024. District-wide, we saw a rate of 2.23% reduction in our chronic absenteeism across the district. Next slide. This shows that information in a slightly different way. It's easier to see in this particular chart how elementary and middle schools had the largest improvements as it related to the chronic absenteeism rates, 3.28% and 3.1% from school year 2023 to 2024. Next slide. And, we've been talking about the graduation rates and the cohorts. This just shows how critical 9th grade school attendance is. And it just shows from school year 23 to 24, how our 9th graders had a slight decline in their chronic absenteeism rate, but that the rate of 9th grade chronic absenteeism is higher than we want. And it certainly speaks to and informs perhaps a grade band that we need to continue to support as it relates to chronic absenteeism. Though trending down, it is still a high grade band. So we've had 2 full months of school. Now, when we pull this data, we wanted to show September across a 3-year trend. So when comparing September 2023 to 2024 and our current school year in September 2025, all of the categories of schools except for middle school increased their chronic absenteeism rate, with some ranging from 0.7 to almost 8% increase when you look at from September across all 3 years, where we were this time each particular year. Next slide. And looking at specific student groups, and this correlates with what I referenced earlier, just around the district decrease as it related to chronic absenteeism. This just gives a student group snapshot across the district. We reduced our chronic absenteeism by 2.23%. But what this shows is that across all demographics, whether it was multilingual learners or male and female, free and reduced meals, or a student's ethnicity and students with disabilities, each of the groups saw a reduction across each student group between school year 23 and school year 24. There was a consistent decrease in our chronic absenteeism rate. The next slide. The next slide talks about when we looked at September. So the previous slide showed where we were September 2023, 24, and 25, and how there has been an increase in most of our schools in the month of September. And we just talked about what are some of the things that could have contributed to September specifically being higher than we've seen September in previous years. Well, we know this September, our school system launched a new student information system. And so we know that there are learning curves for our parents. We know there's a learning curve for our employees, and record keeping is extremely important. While our students are coming to school, being able to mark students present and absent, and those that have excused and or lawful absences versus those who do not. And so we know that this year it was more significant in September than in past years, because largely we believe of the change in our student information system to Synergy. So we're learning the modules, even as our new employees gained employment into PGCPS. Some took additional days before they had access to Synergy or Synergy modules, some computers for parents. So we know that there has been a significant change in our system. And this is what we can point to as a change, and what has occurred in September this year that was more significant than in the last 2 years, September, as we began school. Next slide. And you can go to the next slide. So it's always important to talk about what constitutes an excused versus an unexcused absent. And so we have an administrative procedure, 5113, that talks about our attendance. It gives categories and reasons for what is considered a lawful or excused absence, and anything outside of that is not. And so there are 13 or 14 reasons why a student may be lawfully or excused absence. And some of them include, as you would imagine, sickness and death in the family, as well as a couple of years ago, we instituted a mental health day. So we know a student can be absent one day a semester, each semester. And with the MH code, that day is considered a lawful absence. And so whether a student has a behavioral need, or for our pregnant students, those who have been suspended, those are lawful absences, as well as those who have other emergencies, or our parenting students. So these are some of the reasons a student can be lawfully absent for school. And so vacation is not considered a lawful or excused absence. And so we know there is a correlation between students who are lawfully absent and their ability to maintain their coursework and make up the work, and those who are unlawfully absent or for reasons unknown, wherein a parent may not have communicated the reason a student may have been absent from school, and that student's ability to gain makeup work. And so that's how excused and unexcused absences are defined by our system. Next slide. So when we look specifically at our excused versus our unexcused absences, there was a slight decrease in the percentage of our excused absences from school year 23. And when we looked at that compared to school year 24, we in essence have more students who have unlawful absences than those who have a lawful absence. Next slide. And again, looking at the information by gender, our males were marked absent slightly more frequently than our females, looking at last 2023 and school year 2024. And so you see between the 2 years, regardless of the overall number of students, the percentages are almost equal for both years by gender. And so what's equally as significant as looking at the data is what are some of our efforts as it relates to chronic absenteeism, habitual truancy, and really our overall attendance in PGCPS. And what we did this school year is to take a step back to not just communicate what we're doing with our external partners, but what is our overarching plan for attendance? And so we determined that there were 4 priorities to the attendance work that we would do, whether it's chronic absenteeism or supporting our habitual truancy. Number 1, what is our overarching goal and what is it that we're looking to accomplish in our school system? One of the things that at one of our meetings with all of our associate superintendents, just in looking to determine what a feasible goal would be, we did a deeper dive in working with the Office of Monitoring and Accountability to see what is actually driving our chronic absenteeism rates. And we saw that, number 1, 32% of our students were chronically absent last year. And that is largely due to our unexcused absences. So we wanted to know, out of the chronic absenteeism, is it the excused or is it the unexcused that drives that number? And so we learned that it is the number of unexcused absences that is driving our chronically absenteeism rate. And then when we look at the excuse reasons for our students, we wanted to know, is it sickness or is it suspension, which are equally lawful reasons for being absent. But sickness drives the reason why our students are chronically absent and excused for an excuse. So it is an illness versus a suspension that drives the excuse portion of our chronically absent data. And so we determined that based on that our goal would be to reduce chronic absenteeism. And as Dr. Merrill said, it's a lofty goal by 3%, but looking at doing that district-wide. We were really close to that at the end of last school year when we saw a 2.23 rating reduction. We want to continue to see our chronic absenteeism rate go down. And so number 1, creating a goal. And then number 2, creating and communicating with schools our systemic plan. What is our systemic plan for how we communicate and all of the strategies that schools are doing, from our multi-tier systems of support to our mental health supports to mentoring and how we're referring students to sit, our home visits, our stat days, and all of the strategies that schools are doing currently to address students as they come into schools at the beginning of the school year, having contracts and really using that data, that dashboard, to determine who are those students who have had a pattern of not coming to school, and then creating plans for those students and then monitoring the data. And so the data becomes important depending upon what we do with each individual student to provide support to their needs. And then thirdly, looking at how we engage our external partners and how we have re-engagement meetings with those students for whom any strategy or intervention has failed before they reach the habitual truancy rate. And then fourthly, communicating our journey and our progress and our plan. And so these are some of the things that we have taken a step back this year to try to formulate, as well as working with principals and doing attendance campaigns, and some of the things that we'll see broadcast shortly. But looking at what we do, how we communicate to parents, looking at if our chronic absenteeism rate is mostly driven by our unexcused absences, then what should schools be doing to address the unexcused absences. And what are the reasons for unexcused absence? Is it that the student should actually be excused and there was no note or no communication? So it is an absence with an unknown reason. So trying to look now more forensically as what is driving our unexcused rate. Is it skipping or class cutting? And looking at those things so that we can determine what strategy now we need to employ in order to get the results that we want to see. And that is 3% reduction in our chronic absenteeism rates. And so I think that might be my last slide or our last slide. And now open for questions.
Thank you. We'll pause and take questions. I see Vice Chair Boozer Struthers here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Faison. I'm really encouraged by the focus you gave here on making sure that the data in the system is correct to help drive decision making, and that is exactly, where this, when I have my audit committee hat on versus my academic achievement hat, where I'd probably be talking more blueprint interventions and community schools. I've been concerned about that input data. I will tell you as a user of it, as a parent, that I could find lots of corrections in my own. I need to I already this school year of a ninth grader have to correct a lawful sickness from day 2. Day 1's right, day 2's not. Why this happens is, I think, probably the new system, and we put this on teachers at the high school level. And I think talking to the teachers about how this gets done each day is really important. I think the principals can tell us why their students are absent. They know them best, and the programs that they need to respond. And I think there is a lot of frustration in the system of that we don't have the right programs to the reason code. And I think that's this year's big fix, right? Is that we're going to get the data that tells us the why, and then we're going to fund the programs that respond to the why. And that's where I feel like we're headed. And that is great progress. And I don't put this solely on PGCPS. I put this on the state, because the state does not care why there's chronic absenteeism. They only care about the number, and they do not ask the school systems to explain the number. They do not care about the data. They've got one number. They don't care if it was lawful or unlawful. It's a percentage, and that is very difficult to operate in when we have a public health crisis in Prince George's County with lack of access to health care, because it's not just being sick, it's the whole family's access to health care has to happen during the school day, because it's the only access to hours of medical care or interventions or primary care, and more than one family member leaves the school, and we know that, but we aren't talking about that, and that's the state's fault. And I will continue to say it, and I will hopefully work with others who have more power than me to change that policy, that they start to care. But I would say for September, that is synergy, that is the change. I'm seeing it. You should own that for sure. I know it'll even out. But I think the biggest thing you've said here that we need to care about as audit committee is that the data and the programs are going to match, that system has been put in place. And I want to say thank you for that. So that concludes my comments. I do not have, I'm not sure I have any questions. I'll think about it.
Thank you, Board Member Struthers, for Vice Chair Struthers for that comment. We'll move to round 2, and I want to recognize Board Member Briggs.
Thank you. Are we round 2 or round 1? Round 1. This is my first time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you went already. My bad.
So I just wanted to say I really appreciate the presentation, and I think this was really thorough, and it was really clear. So I feel like everything you shared made a lot of sense, and I'm excited that this is an approach that you all are taking that's data driven And it's also like getting into the forensic, right? You're like getting into the nitty gritty and splitting hairs, because that's the thing, how we move forward is like getting into the details. I did just have some pieces that I wanted to add in there and was curious. Well, either it's in a comment or it's a question too, but I'm thinking about transportation, and I keep having families reach out to me and they're like, oh, and this really also is getting to board member Boozer Struther's point around coding. But I have families that are like, my child is getting to, their first period class halfway through it or not at all. And they're missing it. And then there's this attendance piece that's not consistent across schools, where some school students are being marked late, tardy, et cetera, et cetera. And I just wonder, with the coding and with this new shift with transportation, it feels like it would be right to adjust the tracking of information of like, how has this new transportation shift impacted attendance, and what does that look like, and how many of the whether it's chronic or tardy, like how many of those things are tied to the transportation piece, because I feel like that's going to be really important information for the transportation team, and I think for board members too, when we continue to hear and get calls from constituents to make a case. The other thing I was going to say was just around, I know you talked about like a lot of the strategies, and I'm sure this is already the case, Dr. Faison, but like around evidence-based and research-based strategies, because I know you talked about strategies, but I'm just curious, like, to Boozer Struther's point, like, we could throw food at the wall and see what sticks, or we could like be very precise. And it feels like there is precision here. So I was just curious, like around the strategies that you are implementing, including things like family engagement, that, we know when families are involved, they are more committed. If they see teachers, if they have relationships, they're going to get their kids to school versus the family that's not engaged. And so I'm just curious, what are some of those evidence-based, research-based strategies that are tied to the work you're doing?
Thank you for that question, because as we ended last school year and did that great presentation about All Here in June, we saw the exodus of All Here as a system. And so we had 32 schools who had utilized All Here, and now they are no longer a functioning company. So we have spent the last couple of months hearing presentations from organizations that do very similar things, such as Power School and School Messenger has a framework much like All Here, but All Here really was a standalone system, because it incorporated the AI component that was a bi-directional communication from the school system to the family to alert them that your student is reaching chronically absenteeism rates, and the family could communicate back to our school system through that portal. And if there was a question that AI could not provide, it would alert a principal or a PPW. And so we are missing that particular system, but we are dating others to determine, where can we find something that is very similar to that, including looking at synergy and what it may afford us in the next iteration, where we can do more customization. One thing that we are looking to do in January with Synergy is roll out letters that will allow us to communicate to families in a way that is an automatic communication campaign, or a family engagement campaign, where it will alert families at a 5-day, it will alert families at a 10-day. And the other thing that we're looking to do is have school-based parent attendance forums. And so last year we worked with the state attorney's office to roll out this particular school-based parent, well, it really was clustered schools with this parent engagement forum, but it really was only for habitual students who had been absent 20%, and that is at least 36 days unexcused, unlawful. And so we want to dial that back to now have schools doing this on their own when students are reaching just 10 days unlawful absences. And so really having this progressive lens on attendance. And then lastly, looking at our multi-tiered systems of support. This year, we work with the Office of Academics to roll out a new multi-tier systems of support, Canva, training site, resources, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 approaches for academic support, behavioral support, attendance support. And so really looking at providing additional training, as well as, our Maryland consortium really providing our school system with $24 million in additional resources. Some of those resources are parent engagement programs, even for our early learners at our Judy Hoyer Early Learning Center, as well as mentoring and a number of things that will really provide wraparound support to the family. And so we're really hoping this year to be able to really enhance some of the strategies that we've used in the past, not just electronic, not just home visits, and certainly doing things before students are referred to court or interagency, but having more school-focused strategies and finding ways to engage parents better, not the either or, but the both and type of approach. And then our attendance task force meeting monthly. So there's a cross office or inter-office body of professionals and leaders and principals and central office staff who meet monthly to look at our data. Office of Accountability, Monitoring Accountability is a part of that. Area offices are a part of that. Principals are a part of that. PPWs. So we have from administration to boots on the ground who attend that, support and insight and strategize around where we are as a system, where do we want to be, looking at other LEA plans and what they're doing about attendance, and finding the best soup that works for us, the best ingredients that work for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. One of my questions was, Dr. Faison, what about what are we doing at the elementary school? So one thing that when it comes to like truancy, a lot of times students, and we've spoken about this as a whole in the truancy work group that both of you and I both sit in, is like when it comes to truancy, a lot of times children don't find themselves like connected to the school system for whatever reason. A lot of times they don't see themselves in the curriculum, or they don't feel that the curriculum or the material that they're learning is valuable to their end state, if they even have an end state or end goal. And so what like intervention programs do we have to kind of do a inventory of assets? So like what is the child good at, and how are we kind of helping them to see themselves and how to leverage the curriculum or leverage education to get them to where they would like to be. So are we doing any work around that?
Thank you. That's a really good question. And I will say, over the last couple of years, we had a personal education plan. We call it a pep talk with students. And it started with 1st, 4th, 7th, 9th, and 11th graders. And over the years, when we rolled out Naviance, our college readiness platform, students could find in that platform a career assessment, to your point, that would allow students to assess their skills, their abilities, and their interests, and to find out what they're good at, and then what might they need to learn, what college might they need to go to in order to be able to do what they like to do and they're good at every single day. And so this year is the first year that we are now rolling out. We went from Naviance to School Links, that is our new college readiness platform, and it has an elementary component. So we are going to enhance what we've done for 1st and 4th graders to now have a more standardized career assessment in school links in the same way that we've done that for our our secondary grades. And then I would just say, I think there is an opportunity for growth and enhancement and more focus on what you're asking, so that the next time we have this conversation, we can tell you how, it's going. And then what have we done really to connect a student's interests and their abilities to see themselves in the curriculum, that they'll understand how what they are good at and what they want to do will equal a post either secondary career or employment or apprenticeship or preparation, but it will link to their life's goal. So I think there is also an opportunity for growth in that area.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, and I appreciate that transparency because, just a moment of transparency myself. Like when I was in school, I didn't only reason why I went to school is to be eligible to play basketball. And like I was to the point where I calculated what I needed to do in order to get to C. Like I could just do this much in order to get a C. If I did my homework and I showed up, like that was like 40%. You know what I mean? And the only thing I need is 30 more percent if I do this way on it. I had it down to a science. But basketball was what I was chasing just to stay eligible to play basketball in order to go to college. So I just that was my thing. And everybody is not into athletics or whatever like that, but it's like I knew that high school or school in general was a vehicle to get where I want to. And sometimes as academics, we teach education as if it's the end state instead of the vehicle to get where we want to be in life. And, academics is the end state for people in academia, like if you want to be a professor or a doctor or whatever, but the vast majority of us, are going to use education as a tool necessarily, not necessarily a vocation. And so that's just a question, because I believe that if we can make that connection, we can, drive down those truancy numbers tremendously. Just, what I'm thinking out loud. Thank you.
And thank you for that. If I can just add, I know that there are lots of academies and that there are programs in our school system, and there's specialty programs as well that really are intended to help children learn skills and trades and certifications, that they can see themselves doing according to their interests. And I mean, just in full transparency, as a parent, it was the Benjamin D. Falloy, Creative Performing Arts School that was a lifeline, to my own child. And it was that through line of music that allowed him to graduate, from Oxon Hill High School and then go on to doing what he, does now in music. But it is our Prince George's County Public Schools programs that we can do a better job from the career assessment and some of our partners, from student services to CTE to academics to curriculum and instruction, and how we work together to do what it is that you're talking about now. But I know that it works.
Thank you. I would like to recognize Vice Chair Boozer Strother.
Yeah, thank you so much. Definitely want to second all those ideas, and particularly at the high school level, making sure that every student matters, and are engaged and supported and joining clubs and everything to keep them more connected. I think that we have more work to do in that regard as well. I wanted to go back to the data component. I liked what you said about expanding synergy to send alerts when there's any absence at all. It'd be great if there was a class absence or day of absence that was able to, that we could get more alerts out of that system as parents. One, to inquire around what transpired, but two, if we're unaware of it, and two, to then help correct any data that's not an actual absence so that so that the divisions do not have data that's incorrect, elevated numbers. So definitely want to second that. And also it reminded me, I do not think the robocalls are happening. Now that we have been discussing this, I do not recall getting robocalls for the 2 illness absences that we personally experienced. So I thought I would just raise that as one data point to look into. And those robocalls have been very helpful as well, because they do call out. They could also be another source of data that needs to be corrected to help your numbers be more accurate. So thanks.
And thank you for that. So in the draft plan that we have presented to the superintendent, school messenger is to launch those daily absences. And then looking into the 5-day, the 10-day, like what are those benchmarks where something uniform will happen in every single school at those benchmark absences. But you're correct. School messengers should be making those robocalls. I believe the first week or so it may not have, but it should be at this point.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, if there are no further questions. Thank you, Dr. Faison and team, for this wonderful presentation tonight. And we will move on to next steps 4.0 and 4.1. The follow items will be posted to board docs upon receipt. And then lastly, we'll move to the adjournment. Again, I want to thank everyone for a great meeting. The question is to adjourn November 4th, 2024 Board Audit Committee meeting without objection. Hearing that there is no objection, the November 4th, 2024 Board Audit Committee meeting has adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and have a blessed evening.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
And always.